Good afternoon. As we prepare to consider the next segment of our Midweek Lenten service, which has to do with this marvelous prayer from St. Francis of Assisi, why the prayer, as you recall, reads like this: Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me so love. Where there is injury, let me so pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not seek so much to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in forgiving that we are forgiven, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. It would have been our privilege to have heard this portion of this evening's event from Pastor Omar Sadi. But given the fact that we do not have that opportunity to gather together as a community, so let me share what he would have shared that evening. It is in that last phrase, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Kent Nurburn shares this story in relationship to that. There are many ways to die. A butterfly dies to the caterpillar when it sheds its chrysalis and takes wings. Francis died to his youthful life of physical pleasures when he stood naked before his Father and renounced his good worldly goods. A person can die to a previous relationship by committing wholeheartedly to someone new. Still, most of us, when we think of dying, think only of the death of the body, and so we confront the thought of death with fear and trepidation. But if we expand our understanding of death to see it as a change of lives, death can be a movement from darkness to light, as surely as from light to darkness. If we look for the deaths that free us to something new and better, we are less inclined to look upon death with fear and more inclined to embrace it with hope. When Francis tells us that in dying we are born to eternal life, there is no doubt that he is referring to salvation into a life with Christ. And for those of us who can embrace this belief in all of its fullness, it offers a balm to the spirit and becomes a pole star around which we can build our entire life and faith. But even for those of us who are not so certain of the life that awaits us after our physical death, Francis's message still has a great lesson to teach and a great consolation to offer. It reminds us that our actions in this world and our ability to rise above the limits of our own self-interest live on far beyond us and play their humble part in shaping a world of spirituality and peace. Never did this come home to me more clearly than several years ago when I was running a seminar on fatherhood for a group of teachers. On the last evening, a Nigerian man was scheduled to come in and drum with us. I had not met him. He had been scheduled independent of my participation. His portion of the programming was insignificant to me, and I looked upon it as a little more than a final evening's event that could as easily have been 100 other activities. But the man was scheduled, so I acceded graciously and left the agenda open for him. On the night of his presentation, he arrived about an hour early with an extensive collection of drums of all colors and shapes and sizes. He conscientiously tuned them and set them out for our use. One by one we shuffled in for his session and took our seats in the circle he had arranged. He had a smile of incredible warmth and a dignity of manner that made us all feel clumsy and raw-boned. But his gracious heart quickly took away all our self-consciousness, and soon we were all drumming together and working our way toward a common rhythm and expression. It was a wonderful experience, far more meaningful than any of us had expected. The man and his drums brought us a joy and camaraderie that we had not existed up to the time of his arrival. The music became a metaphor for community, and to a person we were touched by what he had created. As it neared 9 o'clock, the time scheduled for the ending of the event, a number of people asked the man to stay a bit longer. He smiled graciously, but demurred. "I'm sorry," he said. "I have to leave." Because we had come to feel close to him in our short time together, we pressed him. "Just a bit longer," we asked. "I can't," he explained. "I have to catch a plane. I'm going back to Lagos for my mother's funeral." We were shocked. He had been totally given to us, totally present, treating us like our activity was the most important event in the world to him, and through it all his heart had been carrying the burden of his mother's death. "Your mother's funeral?" we asked incredulously. "Yes," he said. "It was scheduled for last week, and we dare not put it off again." "Why was it put off?" someone asked. "I had said I would come and be here with you," he replied matter-of-factly, "so I had it changed." "You put off a funeral to be with us?" The man smiled that deep, warm, loving smile that had graced us with all evening. "Oh, yes," he said. "Our funerals aren't like yours. There are many people that have to come." "How many?" someone asked. "About 5,000, he said. "All of her village." And we, the 30 of us, looked at him. "So you put that off for us?" And he smiled again. "Yes, I had told you I would be here. I am honored that you shared the evening with me, and I thank you." With that, he left. We all sat in stunned silence, overwhelmed by the sense of dignity and grace that this man had brought to us. One by one we rose and made our way back to our rooms, lost in our own thoughts and feelings. There were other activities the following morning, all the presentations, wrap-ups, hugs, and goodbyes, but each of our hearts was filled with the indelible image of a gentle man who had changed the time of his mother's funeral a half a world away in order to spend a few hours of time with a group of 30 people he did not know, because he had given us his word. I do not know the man's name. I cannot even remember what he looked like. In all physical senses, he is as dead to me as if he had passed from this life, and for all I know, he has. But he has eternal life in my heart as the man who taught me about honor and quiet dignity and graciousness of spirit. And I will try to teach my children what he taught me, and teach my children to teach their children. In our hearts, this man will never die. Such events occur in our lives on a daily basis, lodging in our hearts to become part of the legacy of our lives. They form our spirits and touch the spirits of those that we touch. I remember once, as a very young child, seeing an old man and woman crossing the street together. To me, they were incalculably old, white-haired, bent over, with shaky hands and unsteady limbs. They moved cautiously toward the curb, then stepped down together. The man took the woman's arm. I can see it today. He held her arm closely as she shuffled into the street, though he himself was unsteady on his feet. The light changed, the cars began honking, but that man never wavered, never took his eyes or his arm from his wife. He carried her, supported her, though his own legs could barely stand, and she leaned into him with total faith and confidence, as if he were the very rock of safety itself. Her faith made him stronger. Together they walked through the traffic, buoyed up by each other and their faith in each other's love. I could not have been more than 6. I knew nothing of love's selfless offices, but in that moment I learned more of the steadfastness of love than in all the years since. That man and woman who never even knew I was watching set before me a standard to which I will always aspire. With their linked arms and shaky hands, they shape the clay of my young life. Like the gentleman from Nigeria, that couple will always be alive for me. When I am tempted to be harsh in my family and find myself wanting to assert my own claims over those of my wife or children, the image of that couple rises up and guides me. They have eternal life in my heart. Who is to say what we leave another when we pass from their life? Though we may no longer be present to them physically, by our words and actions we have shaped some small part of their being, and in passing their life along, they will take what they have shaped in them and use it to help shape another. All our actions on this earth have eternal life. It is up to us to determine whether our actions have a life that increases the light in the world or adds to the darkness. What Francis calls us to understand is that the actions that increase light in this world are actions that come from the death of self-interest. The awareness of self is our greatest human conundrum. It is what separates us from others and establishes our individuality, but it is also the one thing we share with all other human beings, so it increases our common humanity. When we act to serve our self-interest, we increase our separation. When we die to that self-interest, we increase our commonality. The man who drummed with us had died to his own self-interest, and because of that, he touched us each at a place in the center of our own humanity and will live forever as an instrument of God's peace in all our hearts. The elderly couple, unaware even that they were being observed, were acting in the interest of each other rather than themselves, and in doing so opened the heart of a young boy to the reality of love. If we can die to that part of us that separates us from others, our individual desires, our self-interests, the attitudes and emotions that build walls around us, and come alive to the part of us that we share in common with others, our human emotions, our capacity for service, our caring for the earth and the things upon it, we can use the self as a way to embrace the world and become one with the hearts of those we meet. It is a rare and delicate balance, for we can never truly be free of our own sense of self, but we can recognize that it is in divesting ourselves of our own point of view, our own demands, that we truly become open to the world and the magic it contains. The artist who gives himself over to painting the portrait of another, the nurse who tries to become one with the patient's pain and fear, knows this balance on a daily basis. They walk on a gossamer thread between their own consciousness and that of another, moving back and forth as needed to use their skills to serve the vision to which they are committed. We all, in our daily lives, are called to walk this same gossamer thread. When we listen to someone with all our heart, not to offer advice, but to be present to their fears and dreams, when we give selflessly of our time or energy to help someone in need, these are the times when we are dying to self and coming alive to eternal life. We may not always be able to free ourselves totally from our own self-interest, but if we can fully be alive to their interests, that is close enough. Our lives are our witness, and our witness is our legacy. It is what lives on in the world after we are gone. If our witness is to selfishness, our eternal legacy is one of selfishness. If our witness is to love and kindness and the best of the human heart, it is that which lives on in the hearts of others after we are gone. Though Francis would have said that by our witness we achieve eternal life in heaven, it is perhaps not so wrong to take a humbler tack and say that what we witness has eternal life here on earth. If what we bind by our actions here on earth is also bound in an eternal realm beyond the veil of knowing, we are all the more blessed. But it is enough to know that in the great symphony of creation, we played our part purely, humbly, and without discordance. When we pass and our spirit ascends to pierce that one new hole in the midnight sky, we can be sure that the light of God will shine down a bit brighter on this earth. And somewhere, sometime, one person coming after us will stand for a fleeting moment in the presence of that light and know, if only for that moment, that they too have been called to be an instrument of peace. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Grace us with your presence. Bless us with the amazing gift of your Spirit, and may we indeed find the ways to be that instrument that truly marks the lives of others. God bless you. Have a blessed evening.